The USS Enterprise wasn't just an aircraft carrier, but a ghost that struck fear into the Japanese. In the Pacific, it participated in more battles than any other ship, using its 9 lives to escape even when its fate was sealed. But how did one vessel down more than 900 enemy aircraft, while sending another 192 Japanese ships to the bottom of the ocean? December 7th, 1941. 6 Japanese aircraft carriers find their way about 230 miles off the coast of Oahu, Hawaii. Approximately 6 a.m., more than 100 Japanese aircraft take off, swarming the airspace around Pearl Harbor, where they'd unleash a hell unlike anything the United States had ever seen. They struck strategic U.S. targets stationed in Pearl Harbor, sinking many vessels, including the USS Arizona and numerous aircraft. In the aftermath, more than 2,400 Americans died, suffering a fate that sent the country into shock. Just 2 days later, on December 8, 1941, the United States would officially declare war on Japan with an 82-0 vote in the Senate. And Uncle Sam was about to rain down hell on the Japanese.
Knew they had to save the ship and their shipmates, and they wouldn't be deterred by raging fire, exploding bombs, or trepidation.
With one aircraft carrier going from myth to legend, feared by every Japanese sailor as they boarded their own vessels. Before the events of Pearl Harbor, the USS Enterprise mostly spent its days ferrying troops from the US mainland to Guam and Wake Island. In fact, she had just left for Wake Island on November 28th, carrying a detachment of US Marine pilots. Yet on her way back to Pearl Harbor on December 2nd, she'd spent 5 days at sea before the unthinkable happened. While the world was still reeling from what happened at Pearl Harbor, the USS Enterprise received word about the attack while returning to port in Hawaii. She immediately changed course, first coming across a submarine just a few hundred miles north of Hawaii. The Enterprise unleashed her SBD Dauntless dive bombers, and within a few minutes, the first Japanese submarine would meet its end in the Pacific. But this wasn't just a bombing mission. It set the tone for what would turn the USS Enterprise into one of the most feared weapons in all of World War II. Over the next 4 years, the Enterprise would become a thorn in the side of the Japanese, often sinking vessels before simply disappearing, earning it the name the Grey Ghost. In total, nearly 200 Japanese vessels met their end at the hands of the Enterprise, with another 900 aircraft falling from the sky and making it the most decorated vessel in the US Navy. But how did it manage to evade near-certain defeat and dominate the Pacific theater? Following an intense few months early in the war, the Enterprise played a significant role in missions such as the Doolittle Raid in Tokyo, but it wasn't until the Battle of Midway in June 1942 that it truly showed its power. Now under the command of Rear Admiral Raymond A. Spruance as part of Task Force 16, the Enterprise was ordered to hold Midway and inflict maximum damage on the enemy by strong attrition tactics. By May 30th, Task Force 17 arrived to join the battle. Under the leadership of Rear Admiral Frank J. Fletcher, it brought with it 2 cruisers and 6 destroyers to supplement Task Force 16, which already had the USS Hornet, 6 cruisers, 10 destroyers, and 4 oilers. By June 4th, the Japanese were ready, bringing the 1st, 2nd, and 5th Air Fleets, supplemented by the 11th Air Fleet. In total, the Japanese outnumbered the US Navy, and in the early morning, the battle kicked off. Both sides launched repeated strikes and aerial raids on the others, with the Japanese having more than 240 carrier-based aircraft. The battle raged until June 7th, but it was already done before 11 a.m. on June 4th. The Japanese attack on Midway failed, and 3 of its carriers were already burning. It was just a matter of time before the 4th would fall, and just a day later, she fell, with the remaining Japanese vessels scurrying back to safety. The exact number of kills scored by the USS Enterprise is impossible to know, but by the end of June 7th, only 2 US vessels were lost, with a total of 113 aircraft. For the Japanese, the number was far higher. 4 carriers were at the bottom of the ocean, 272 aircraft were either damaged or downed, and a Japanese cruiser also fell to the onslaught. The Enterprise survived, returning to port just a few days later. But this wouldn't be its only success in the Pacific theater. Over the next 3 years, the Enterprise and her crew would set sail on numerous missions, many of which would ultimately change the tide of war. Yet she wasn't invincible, as was proven during the Battle of the Eastern Solomons, where she endured 3 direct hits from Japanese bombers with another 4 near misses. Almost 60 of her crew would die that day, but quick work from damage control ensured she would make it back to Hawaii for repairs. After a few months of repairs and upgrades, the Enterprise was immediately thrust back into the Pacific Theater, where she'd assist and dominate in various battles, including Iwo Jima, Okinawa, Luzon, and Tokyo. But from a Japanese point of view, the Enterprise was seen completely differently. Each time they had struck the Enterprise, they claimed to have sunk it. In fact, the Japanese celebrated victory following the battle in the South Pacific, but just a few months later, they once again appeared on the battlefield. It essentially led to the Japanese calling it a ghost, before telling those in command that perhaps the United States might have more than one of these vessels. But in reality, it was just a bunch of skilled crews, some incredible designs, and the ability to withstand everything the Japanese had thrown at it. Even in 1945, when a Japanese kamikaze pilot directly crashed into the Enterprise, it wasn't enough to sink it. So what was it that made the Enterprise special? Known as the Big E to locals, the Enterprise was the seventh, designated CV-6, to carry the name Enterprise. It was the second of 3 Yorktown carriers commissioned on May 12, 1938. Her armament changed significantly over the course of the war, but at launch she carried 5 8-inch guns, 4 quad 1.1-inch guns, and 24 50-caliber machine guns. Many of these changed throughout the war when 50 20mm cannons and 11 40mm cannons were added to protect her. 5 inches of armor plating was initially added to protect her hull at the waterline, with a 1.5-inch armored flight deck. Each fire control center had about 4 inches of reinforced armor. Her initial displacement was about 25,500 tons, standing at a length of 825 feet. That is more than 8 football fields for some context. Her beam was 109.5 feet, with a 26-foot draft. As for the crew, about 2,200 men could work on board the Enterprise, yet this often fluctuated depending on the time and mission. But her most powerful weapon was certainly the aircraft aboard. The Enterprise could carry 96 aircraft, which was often made up from a combination of fighters, dive bombers, and torpedo planes. And to get her to her destination, 4 steam turbines with the ability to generate a whopping 120,000 horsepower propelled her to a top speed of 32.5 knots. The 1.5 million-gallon fuel tank could allow the Enterprise to operate up to 10,400 nautical miles at a cruising speed of 15 knots. But her efforts in the Pacific would make her one of the most decorated vessels in the Second World War. The Enterprise would earn 20 battle stars, signifying her participation in 20 battles throughout the Pacific Theater. However, her biggest would be at the end of 1942, when she earned the Presidential Citation for staunchly defending Pearl Harbor and destroying hundreds of Japanese combatants. For outstanding service, she also earned a U.S. Navy commendation, with all these awards being awarded to the crews who valiantly put their own lives on the line to not only protect the United States, but also take on some of the most daring naval battles the world had ever seen. Yet she'd serve her final mission by bringing back American soldiers following the war. Following the war, the work of the Enterprise was not finished. With thousands of U.S. troops still stationed in the Pacific and Europe, she was dispatched for 3 missions to Europe. During these missions, she returned about 10,000 U.S. troops. Yet on her final mission home, carrying some 4,400 U.S. troops, she was even boarded by the British First Lord of the Admiralty, Sir Albert Alexander, in Southampton, where she'd be awarded the British Admiralty Pennant. On her way back, she endured numerous storms, with winds of up to 80 miles per hour, but once again survived. Unfortunately, this would be her final voyage. She entered the New York Naval Shipyard on the 18th of January 1946 for deactivation and was decommissioned on the 17th of February 1947. Funds could never be raised to buy her from the Navy, and she would officially be scrapped in May 1960. At least some of her remnants remain, with the world's first ever nuclear-powered aircraft carrier becoming the 8th vessel to carry the name Enterprise. This was also deactivated in 2012, with many of the original mementos being taken off, and now being prepared for the next vessel to carry the name. This will more than likely be the CVN-80, 9th Gerald R. Ford class nuclear submarine, currently scheduled to become operational in 2029. The USS Enterprise was nearly unstoppable. It had 9 lives and survived every battle in the Pacific, but unfortunately, it would simply be scrapped, replaced by something newer. Yet another US bomber, the B-17, almost suffered the same fate. Check out this video to find out why.